Now, one of the key tenets of the idea of India is free speech and dissent. And there it is alleged, Mr. Madhav, that your government has a problem with dissent and dissenters. And somehow you wish to usurp the use of the word national and anti-national to label anybody who disagrees with you as an anti-national. The space for dissent is shrinking on your watch, and this can never be good for the idea of India.
Okay, I said it before, so I say it again, that we should not use words like anti-national too loosely. I agree. My side also, any side also, we should not easily throw that kind of an allegation, accusation against people too easily. And in fact, I am one of those who said that these archaic laws of sedition should be amended, should change. I totally agree with on those issues. But let me tell you, Rahul, those who say that there is no free speech in India, go on to the www, World Wide Web. The amount of scorn you find against our government, our Prime Minister, you don't find anywhere else, against anybody else. Total freedom. Just before this session, previous session, Mr. Maran called BJP all sorts of names. Where is restriction in this country? You have websites dedicated to abusing BJP, abusing Modi, dedicated. And let me also caution you, Rahul, here. The Freedom House report says Indian media is compromised. That is their yardstick. I'm sure you don't agree with that. I hope you don't agree with that, that Indian media is sold out to the government of the day. We have as many people in Indian media who take totally anti-BJP stand as they probably who support some actions of the government. So I don't at all agree with this proposition that freedom is at stake in India. Now, nationalism versus freedom, this is a new debate. The nationalist forces versus freedom. Where is any problem for freedom? If there is any complaint to be made, I should be complaining. Right, for last 70 years, I have been abused day in and day out. As communalist, as fascist, as Hitlerian, as Mussolini's follower. All these abuses you have been heaping on me for 70 years. Today, if I say one sentence, you become very agitated. But sometimes things get back to you. Thoda tolerance rakho, nothing, no threat to freedom in India.
Dr. Tharoor, the BJP counters to say that, from morning till night, there are people in politics and outside who say exactly what they want, and therefore, if politicians, nobody's been jailed in the way that they were during the emergency which happened on the watch of your party, therefore, there is nothing which is happening in India anywhere remotely close to what happened under the Congress's watch during the emergency.
I don't think the emergency is much of a template. I'm on record as having been a critic of the emergency at that time and later. So let's put that aside. Let's talk about today. Because the problem we've got is precisely this whataboutery. We're doing terrible things, but those guys did worse 40 years ago. I mean, come on. That's not a conversation. We have to live for the Indians of today. And the problem is, actually having free speech on the internet is fine. Though increasingly, as you know, there are regulations coming up that raise real question marks about the ability to say what you like on the internet without consequences. That famous line of Idi Amin's who said that I can guarantee freedom of speech, but I can't guarantee freedom after speech. I mean, that seems to be the subtext of some of the BJP's attitudes. But let me say very seriously that if you look at these cases after cases that have grabbed world attention, the number of journalists who've had sedition charges against them for trivial matters. I'm sitting here as a proud object of a sedition case. I'm glad that Ram wants to see sedition read down, I beg your pardon, but that's something the Supreme Court did in 1962. And yet a series of BJP governments in the states are ignoring the Supreme Court's repeated interpretations of sedition and still filing sedition charges against people. You have a journalist, you have a comedian who's in jail for a joke he hadn't cracked, right? You have journalists locked up in various places, some whacked, abused. You've had one journalist from Kerala locked up in UP on his way to Hathras, who is still there, who was allowed out for 48 hours to visit his dying mother and is back in jail. Now you have case after case like this. How do you expect the world not to sit up and take notice? Ram is accusing people of getting agitated. The only one sitting here being agitated is Ram. So I encourage him to see things in the constructive light that I want this discussion to go. We have a country to save. It's essentially where we are. Our country had a certain standing in the world for our incredibly successful management of diversity, of our democracy, the way in which we're able to bring this vast and extraordinarily diverse land, it's not just political pluralism, religious, linguistic, regional, everything, together and make it work because everyone felt they had stakes. This kind of attitude of repression, the wretched atmosphere in university campuses because of the stifling of expression, the fact that so many media organizations, including yours, at various times appear to have come under pressure to conform in certain ways, to take down certain approaches and articles, to suspend a prominent anchor for what would, by most people's yardsticks, be an incredibly minor transgression that at most would have merited a slap on the wrist. But all of these things suggest that there is an atmosphere in which a lot of our guardians of freedom, including the media, have either been cajoled or cudgeled into conformity.